How do you know what you know? What can you know? How are you sure? These are the questions of epistemology. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that seeks to explain the extent of what people can call knowledge and the difference between fact and belief. In 18th century Germany, Immanuel Kant sought to answer these questions. Through his work Critique of Pure Reason, he posed his philosophy of transcendental idealism, also known as German idealism. Before we can explain German idealism, we have to explain the philosophy that Kant developed us from, empiricism. Empiricism, argued by the 18th century philosopher David Hume among others, is the idea that the only things that you could possibly know about the world are things that you experience through your senses. You can only learn from what you see, hear, feel, and sense in other ways. Everything that you learn from others comes from things they experienced, or the knowledge comes from someone who learned it from someone else, who learned it from someone else back centuries into the past. Even scientific observation is just observing with the senses, or using technology that merely creates data for your senses to read. Immanuel Kant wanted to know what is a thing in itself. If all we know about an apple is what we perceive of it, that it is red, round, and tastes sweet, what is an apple from a transcendental perspective? From a perspective outside of the mind, is an apple the same? Are there characteristics of an apple that we can't see? Is there a singular essence of an apple that we cannot grasp? Kant concluded that all of these questions are things that we cannot possibly know. He expanded that into meaning all of reality is indistinguishable with perception. The idea that we can never know what is a thing in itself from a transcendental perspective is known as transcendental idealism or German idealism. The key difference between empiricism and transcendental idealism is that empiricism believes that knowledge comes from people's experiences, while transcendental idealism believes that since people can only know what they sense, knowledge is invented by people and does not exist outside of their mind. From here, Kant concluded that pure reason, the concept of knowing things from logic alone, was not possible. One can only learn from observation, not arbitrary common sense. So he denounced belief in things one cannot see, such as God. Then Kant asked, how can we be sure of what we know? He decided to classify knowledge into different types to explain the exact sources of everything we know. He distinguished between analytic and synthetic knowledge. Analytic knowledge is true by definition. An analytic statement is melted ice is water. It is true because melted ice and water are two words we attribute to the same thing. Synthetic knowledge is true from experience. Ice is cold is synthetic because through experiencing feeling ice, we can learn that it is cold. Ice and cold are not the same concept, therefore it is not analytic. He also distinguished between a priori and a posteriori knowledge. A priori is knowledge made from reason alone. A posteriori is knowledge that comes from sensory experience. In theory, all a priori knowledge is analytic and all a posteriori knowledge is synthetic. This is because for something to be known by pure reason, it would have to be something that by definition is already true. Otherwise, it would be knowledge that is not accessible by our sensory minds. Melted ice is water is a priori because it is reasoned by the simple fact that it is true by definition. As for a posteriori, it would never exist as analytic because it would not make sense to justify with sensory knowledge something that is already true. To review, German idealism can be summed up with 4 points. 1. All we can know is what we sense. 2. We can never know what is a thing in itself. 3. Pure reason does not exist. And 4. Knowledge comes from analytic a priori knowledge and synthetic a posteriori knowledge. So why is all this important? In general, epistemology helps scientists, lawyers, or anyone doing research or making arguments determine what is true and what is just a belief. German idealism specifically helps those people assess whether their argument is fallacious because it uses pure reason instead of proper interpretation of sensory evidence. In a world where there is so much information coming from sources all around the world and right at your fingertips, German idealism can help you determine what can be called knowledge and what can be called belief.